All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I'm hearing a really loud buzz. That's just my headset, probably. Okay. Well, good morning and welcome to the Dan Fagan Radio Show, February 3rd, 2014, 15. And we're glad you're here. It's 6 minutes past 6 o'clock in the morning. Very cold outside, 5 degrees in Anchorage, -3 in Wasilla, and 2 degrees in Palmer. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number if you'd like to be a part of the show. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Do you have another pair of headsets? Because this is Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. We are streaming live on the World Wide Fancy Web. You can avail yourself of that at danfagan.us. Danfagan.us. And check us out there if you'd like. Thank you, Brian. Well, big weekend this past weekend. The same thing. Yes, same thing. Okay. Big Super Bowl. Sorry, folks, we're getting some kinks worked out here. Big Super Bowl weekend this past weekend. Boy, I tell you, that was fun. That was about as good a Super Bowl as I've seen in my lifetime. There were so many, you've got the whole, so many subplots. Tom Brady, Deflate Gate, Seattle and their cockiness. They're trying to repeat. Bill Belichick, is he a cheater? Do you pull for cheater? It was just a really hard fought game, and I thought they were both equally talented teams and really knew. I expected. I'll be honest with you. I expected New England to win. I expected New England to win big. I predicted 34-10, so I was wrong about that. I just didn't think Russell Wilson was that good of a quarterback, but he played well. He didn't play great, but he played well. Of course, Tom Brady was the one who threw 2 interceptions. That was surprising. I suppose had he not thrown those interceptions, it probably would have been more as I predicted. But quite a game, quite a finish, and everybody's. It's so funny. People love to second guess, don't they? There's just nothing quite like armchair quarterbacking. And Pete Carroll, as everyone knows by now, they're on the 1 yard line. They have the best back in the league. Hand the ball to your best back. You win the Super Bowl. Pete Carroll decides to throw the ball. And, of course, it's intercepted. And now he's the worst coach in the history of mankind. The guy is an incredible coach. He brought his team to 2 straight Super Bowls in a row. There's less than a handful of coaches that have been able to do that. Had the receiver caught the ball and it had not been intercepted, of course, nobody would say a thing. But that's not the way it came out. Now Pete Carroll is the GOAT. Isn't that funny how life can change on a dime? You're walking into the greatest sporting event. You brought your team there 2 years in a row. You couldn't be riding higher. And because of one last-minute call at the end of the game, all of a sudden you're a joke, and people think you're stupid, and people think you're a bad coach. Isn't that amazing how quickly life can turn? To me, the lesson there is don't give a rat's ass on what people think of you. If you live your life trying to worry about what people think about you and your legacy and your image and how people perceive you, man, I'm telling you, that's going to be a roller coaster ride. You are going to be miserable. And I think Pete Carroll's probably learning that now, being riding so high. And one little mistake, because people can be unforgiving, especially if you're at the top, especially if you've accomplished a lot and you've really made something of yourself, and you make a mistake, man, they'll tear you down. They will tear you down. The media, that's what they live for. Let's be honest, especially in sports media. What is it that sports talk radio focuses on? It doesn't focus so much on the success of the athletes. Excuse me. It focuses on the failures, the personal failures, the bad calls on the field, the fumbles, the interception. That's what sports media typically focuses on. And that's just the way the game's played. People like to focus on the negative. And here, Pete Carroll, who, by the way, I think he's a really nice guy. He's 60 years old. He looks like he's 40. He's got a lot of energy. He's very positive, and he's obviously a great coach. He used to coach for New England, and I thought one of the greatest, most gracious comments ever. The owner of the New England Patriots talked about when Tom Brady or when Pete Carroll used to coach for him, and Robert Kraft said, I didn't give Pete Carroll the kind of power that I've given Bill Belichick because I was a young owner. Pete was kind of a young coach, so I didn't let him have all the power that Belichick has now. And Kraft said, had I done that, I think Pete Carroll would have been successful with our team. Pete Carroll was fired as coach in New England back in the day, but for Kraft to admit that it was his fault, he didn't give Carroll the power and the authority he needed to do his job. I just thought that was very, very gracious. And now here Carroll comes back and almost beats him, but not quite. What an exciting game. Didn't care for the halftime show. No, not into any of that. I mean, I don't know any of the songs. Obviously, I don't have any Katy Perry 8-tracks in my car. Not a big Katy Perry guy. She seemed like a attractive young lady, but didn't really didn't really see it. Didn't really do it for me. I suppose people liked it, but it just seemed kind of silly. I thought Lenny Kravitz was pretty good. He was okay. And then whoever that guy was, Missy Elliott, she was good. I'm just not into pop music. I don't think I've listened to pop music, since I was in my 20s. I kind of went through a phase where I'd go pop music and then country music and then talk radio. And I think that's pretty typical for males my age. You generally graduate into talk radio because, you start getting more serious about life and you realize, hey, I better pay attention to what's going on around me because, if I don't pay attention, bad things can happen. All right, Dan Fagan Show right here, KOAN, KVNT. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. We are streaming live, danfagan.us. And we are also, that's where we are, KOAN, KVNT. 569-1080 is the number, 569-1080. Email me, danfaganshow at iCloud.com, danfaganshow at iCloud.com. Happy Monday morning to you. Temperatures in the single digits across South Central Alaska. Stay warm. Stay warm. We'll take a quick break. Time currently 6:14. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show. All right, 616. Dan Fagan show. Our number 569-1080. 569-1080. It's -8 and a 2-week pass. In case you were wondering. It's 0 in Bethel. Dutch Harbor 32. Imaniac 0. Fort Yukon -22. Fairbanks -18. It's 1 in Juneau, which is cold for Juneau. Koktovik 10. Kenai 14. Ketchikan 28. And are you ready for this? It's actually raining in Ketchikan, which, of course, it rains every day in Ketchikan. 16 in Kodiak. Kotzebue 3. North Pole -22. Shishmaref 7. Let me give you one more. Skagway 16. Well, we'll do one more. Wrangell 25. So there's your weather on this Tuesday morning, February 3rd. February 3rd? How can that be? Is it honestly February already? Well, this is interesting. You know, the doom and gloom crowd, they say it's over here in Alaska because of the price of oil. Dow up triple digits yesterday. U.S. stocks traded sharply higher on Tuesday on continued momentum from strengthening oil prices. Uh-oh. I thought we're going to fall off the cliff. Come on now. That's not good. What's Brad Keithley going to do for fun? Dow Jones yesterday briefly gained 200 points with Exxon and Mobil and Chevron each rising 2% each. The energy sector rose more than 2% to lead advances on the S&P 500, on track for 4 straight days of gains and the best since January 16th. That's not good. Firming oil prices and news out of Greece cheered U.S. markets into the close on Monday, putting the S&P 500 above 2,000 points and the Dow up nearly 200 points. Oil extended the past few days' gains to trade out about 1% higher on Tuesday to hold above the key $50 level. Here's what Randy Frederick, managing director of trading at Charles Schwab, said. He said, we're obviously seeing a rebound in the oil sector. Wow. What will the doom and gloom crowd do? You know, the doom and gloom crowd that say, well, we're going to have to drastically slash government and then we're going to have to go raise taxes somehow. There's always a movement, ladies and gentlemen, to grow government. And this movement will use any excuse to get more money into government coffers and out of the private sector. They will use any excuse, any fake emergency, any fake crisis. What was it? Obama's chief of staff, never let a good crisis go to waste. Anytime you can use the crisis to transfer money out of the private sector into the government sector, do it. Because all good things come from government. So we'll see. You know, there are so many upsides to the low price of oil. And I don't really see it as a bad thing. First of all, you got Vladimir Putin, who is somewhat neutralized when the price of oil drops in his quest to reform the Soviet Union. You got some of these Middle Eastern countries. We don't want them to have more money because they hate the Jews and Christians and think we should all be dead. And even, frankly, in Alaska, where our government is, I don't know. What did we go? We went from 16,000 state employees And then when Palin came on, we went to 20,000. And then when Parnell came on, we went to 24,000. So the Palin Parnell people really exploded the size of government. I think we could probably do it 10,000. I don't know that for a fact. Obviously, I can't prove that, but my understanding of state government, my talking to people who know the intricacies of state government tell me, A, you can't fire a state employee. B, it takes 3 state employees to do one job. Incompetency rules. There's no accountability. The unions will back up and protect those who are not good at their jobs. So there is inefficiency galore in the government. So the good news is if the price of oil does stay low, then maybe we can cut out some of that waste. Because we're not going to ever do it as long as the billions of dollars are flowing into state coffers. And labor union bosses can say you're against working families if you try to cut a state employee. So that's one of the upsides of the lower price of oil. On a global stage, it's certainly good. And don't forget, every time you step in an airplane, you're going to pay less. Every time you go order a pizza, you're going to pay less. Because energy prices affect every sector of the economy. Literally, when the price of oil goes up $1, it's a tax on all of us. When the price of oil goes down $1, we all gain. So I'm not one of the, everybody calls me oil can Dan because I'm, they say I'm too in favor of the oil industry. Well, I'm just private sector guy. And I know that the state's economy is dependent on a healthy environment to invest for the oil companies. I'm not a big fan of oil companies. I don't really have any feeling about them either way. But I know in Alaska, our health economically depends on a healthy and vibrant oil industry, oil and gas industry. You can call me oil can Dan all you want. I don't get money from the oil companies. They don't pay me. I'm just telling you my thought. And to have an environment where the oil companies in their decision-making room back at their headquarters say, you know what? Let's invest more money in Alaska. I'm for that. I think that's a good thing. That men and women in Alaska can go work in the energy sector, make good paying job earnings. But at the same time, I like to see the oil prices go down. I think overall it's good. The state coffers wins when the oil prices go up. But I don't care about state coffers. I know that's Brad Keithley and his gang. That's all they care about. All they care about is the bottom line of the state, the government. The government's got to get more money. We got to have more government money. Why? Well, because all good things come from the government. So don't get your panties in the water if you see the price of oil low. We'll be just fine. We got like $75 billion in the bank. I mean, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? 569-1080. 569-1080. That's the number if you'd like to be a part of the broadcast. Email me, Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. This Republican race for president, I'm liking the way it's shaping up. I love Scott Walker. And he's the front runner now. He's in the latest polls. He's ahead. Of course, this means nothing at this point. Any man or woman who will take on the most political force on the planet, most destructive political force on the planet today, which is, of course, public employee unions, and live to tell about it and survive, that's a big deal to me. Man, they tried to run Walker out of town over there in Wisconsin. He stood up to the public employee unions. And the Democrats They got so mad at him, they tried to leave the state. They wouldn't even come in to vote. They had to go arrest these Democrats and bring them back and say, you must vote. You must be a part of this process. They tried to impeach him, to recall him. Public employee unions, they play for real. And he literally turned that state around, Wisconsin, from a state that had huge deficits to now one that has surpluses, because he stopped the bleeding that was caused by the public employee unions being able to sit in both sides of the negotiating table for their contracts. As Glenn Beagle says, they're hiring their own bosses. And any man or woman who stands up to public employee unions, man, I'll tell you, that's somebody who is the very personification of courage. So I like Walker. Walker's probably my favorite at this point. Not a big fan of Jeb Bush nor Chris Christie. Do not like Rand Paul at all. I think he's got too many of his wacko dad's ideas. I know that angers a lot of you, but Romney's not running, thank goodness. Glad about that. Don't like Huckabee. He's just too corny. I know I'm sounding like I'm in a bad mood today, but I just do not like Huckabee. He's phony. He just seems fake, and he's got his little stupid jokes, and I don't know. And he raised taxes when he was governor. I don't like people who raise taxes. Ted Cruz, I like his courage. He seems like a little bit of a showman for me. His fellow Republicans hate him because he's always trying to get in front of the camera and make a name for himself. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'd rather have Ted Cruz than any Democrat, obviously, but I don't know. I think he may end up imploding like Michelle Bachmann did. Sometimes those far, far, far right people, they're a little loony. And I'm as conservative as you can get, policy-wise. But I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. Like Rand Paul used to say, I heard about people who get vaccinations and their kids become, crazy. That kind of conspiracy nonsense. Let's deal in reality. It's not conservatives, the Tea Party folks, because they're so anti-government, they latch on to conspiracies much quicker because they think the government's evil. And that's one of my concerns when you get someone who's that far on the right. Their hatred for government is so strong, they'll adopt the position that 9/11 was an inside job. And that's just crazy. 6:30, Dan Fagan Show. 25 minutes ahead of 7 o'clock here on a Tuesday morning, February 3rd, 2015. Dan Fagan Show on KOAN, KVNT. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. Love to hear from you this morning. Give us a call, 569-1080. Let's go to Todd. Todd, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Dan.
How you doing?
Good. I was just listening to your commentary on potential Republican candidates for president, and I agree with you. I think Scott Walker's probably the best candidate because he's the most politically mature. Ted Cruz says things that alienate people.
Yeah.
But I guess I was a little taken aback by your comment that his fellow Republicans hate him.
Okay, I should have clarified that. His fellow members of in the Senate hate him. Not for Republicans in general, the rank and file. Those who, yeah, those.
Well, I'm still taken aback.
Okay,
because Dan Sullivan doesn't hate him.
I think he probably does. I'll say this. We had Amanda Coyne in here, and we had Dan Sullivan in here, and Amanda asked Dan. No, I think it was Bonnie. I don't remember if it was Bonnie or Amanda. It was one of them. And they asked about, would you have supported Ted Cruz's filibuster? And Sullivan kind of rolled his eyes. And I know that really made Bonnie angry, but I don't know who it was, Todd, that told me this. I don't think it was Sullivan, but somebody told me, and it could have been Sullivan, but don't attribute this to Sullivan because I don't remember. But I remember someone telling me that they just feel like his fellow senators, Republican senators, feel like he's always trying to get out in front on everything and take all the credit, and they resent him for that. And I may have read that somewhere, but it's just
that sounds to me like something that Mitch McConnell might say.
It could be,
and I guess that's why I'm a little discouraged because I'm afraid that your establishment Republican monster is trying to crawl out of your body. I don't.
Yeah.
Just tell me one thing that he has stated in front of a camera.
He being Cruz.
Yeah. That is either not part of the Republican platform, or not a conservative idea.
I can't think of anything.
Of course not.
No.
And that's part of the reason why people don't like him, especially the establishment. And I don't think he could be elected as president.
Why not?
Because I don't think he's politically mature enough. Because I think he alienates people because he's too conservative. It's the same reason why Joe Miller wouldn't get elected as senator, even though I was a supporter of Joe Miller. Because the media and those people who aren't very informed in the middle would be put off by straight shooting conservative ideals that are stated in a plain way.
How did Reagan win?
Humor.
Likability.
Yeah.
Charisma.
He's an actor. He understood how to attract people to him and through humor and through charisma.
So you think that this is a general principle now in American politics, that if you're too conservative, you can't get elected?
I think that the way that you state your conservatism can get you into trouble.
And
I know it in my own life. I mean, if you're way too truthful and it comes off as not compassionate, and people are put off by that.
Well, Todd, if you were a political consultant, what would you tell Ted Cruz and Joe Miller to do differently to make them more likable or electable?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something that you can teach someone, because I think it's something that just someone is.
So you don't think Joe Miller will ever be elected to the Senate?
I don't think he'll beat Lisa Murkowski.
What about the Republican primary?
Well, is she a Republican?
She is now.
Until what? She gets beat in the primary, and then she'll be
that's true.
Independent again. I mean,
go through all
if
that
she
again.
runs as a Republican in the primary, I don't think she will be. I don't think he will beat her in the primary.
You don't think he'd beat her in the primary?
No.
The only reason he beat her in the primary the first time is because they snuck up on her and nobody saw it coming.
Yeah, I think people were still angry about the nepotism thing.
Now she is now in a key position on the Senate Energy Committee. I know that's going to be one of the big selling points for her, that we can't give up that position.
That's always been the key selling point, right?
And that wouldn't sway you either way, huh?
No, there's the establishment Republicans. So I'll just put it this way: the federal government owes us Republicans. There's too many of them in the state.
You know, Todd, I respect you, and you've called the show quite a bit, and I've come to think of you as a wise man. So I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to be dead honest with me, because I am honestly on the fence here with this establishment. You know, I hear some people, and you would not be one of them, but they just are so unreasonable in their hatred of Mitch McConnell and John Boehner. It's as though these guys are worse than Obama. And I just know that's not true. And so I have a real hard time being an establishment Republican hater, because, and I use the word hater in the figurative term. You know, obviously nobody's really hate anybody here, but just this idea that all they can talk about is Boehner and McConnell, and it's as though Obama has done no wrong. And to me, that's a misguided focus. Am I wrong there?
Well, I think that knowing that the Democrats are going to make the wrong choices nearly all the time, or
100%.
as you say, all the time, 100%.
Yep.
Some of us are not interested in even going there. It's a given. We don't have to devote our time and energy to talk about how wrong the Democrats and the progressives are. So instead, what we talk about is our disappointment with people who should know better, who have contributed to the problems in our country, whether it be the spending problems, the entitlement problems, the dependency creation problems. And so we're not interested in focusing our energy on beating up people who it's a given. Well, of course, their policies are wrong-headed and destructive. And so I think it comes off as being, oh, we think they're worse than the Democrats. We don't. Most of us end up voting for unfortunately, the establishment, unless they're horrible. And we can't, our conscience won't let us. Like, I don't vote for Don Young. I won't vote for Lisa Murkowski. I won't vote for any pro-life, or pro-choice, Republican.
Yeah. So if George Bush hadn't been disciplined with his domestic spending, which clearly he was not, this would be a very different country today. We probably would have never seen the likes of Barack Obama.
Do you mean the first George Bush or the second one?
Well, frankly, both. but let's just say the 8 years that George W. Bush had he been disciplined with the spending domestically, I understand the wars, that's a different story. But he grew domestic spending faster than LBJ, percentage-wise. Had he been disciplined, we would have never gotten Barack Obama. We'd be a much more prosperous country because a Republican would have acted like a Republican.
Yeah, and more importantly, though, Congress and the Republicans in Congress during that time. See, presidents don't spend money.
Yeah.
Congress spends money.
No, you're right.
And so, it's a combination of many years of that, and it's frustrating.
Thanks, Todd.
Yeah.
Appreciate your call. Have a good morning yourself. 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number in Anchorage. 888. No. That's it. 569-1080. I'm going back to the old show. I'm still not functioning properly here, folks. I will probably by the 7 o'clock hour. Dan Fagan Show, iCloud.com. Dan Fagan Show, iCloud.com. That's where you email me. Time currently, 6:45. Well, good morning, 646 on this February 3rd, 2015. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show on KOAN, broadcasting on 95.1 FM or AM 1080. Also, we are broadcasting on KVNT out in the Valley, 95.2 FM and 1020 AM. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. And email me, Dan Fagan Show, iCloud.com. We are streaming on the big fancy World Wide Web. And you can see us, danfagan.us. It's funny, so many people who've listened to this broadcast are beginning to be concerned about, and I hear from them. I hear from you guys. I'm hearing your voice that I'm losing my Tea Party conservative ways. I can tell you, if you were to make me dictator, you would see that is not even close to true. Government is a dismal failure, 90% of what it does. And I would slash it in dramatic fashion. State and federal and city. As far as city government, I'd get rid of, what was it, Tom McGrath telling us about the 7 entities that the city just doesn't need anymore. Merrill Field, ML&P. I mean, you go down the list. Just get rid of all of them. Sell them. On the state level, I'd get rid of the Department of Education. I mean, I just go down the list. Federal level, same thing. No ATF. No Department of Commerce. Just get rid of all that junk. Does nothing but redistribute wealth and go to war with the private sector. Obviously, public safety you maintain. And when it comes to education, I would begin to try to privatize it. Make school choice the focus. Make those who now control the education bureaucracy and those who are literally producing leftists in mass, let them compete. Break up the teachers' union monopoly. No more public employees being able to unionize. If you're a public employee, you're a public servant, and you do not get to unionize. You do not get to negotiate with people you elected to office. It's a public service to work for the government. You're a public servant. It doesn't mean you get 35% more in salary and benefits than the rest of us. And you can't be fired. That's what it means now. It'll be the first thing you change. Even FDR, the second most liberal president we've ever had next to Barack Obama, said that we shouldn't allow government employees to negotiate and collectively bargain as a union. That's why we are where we are today with government as big as it is. So these are the type of policies I favor. But I also am a man who's not given to conspiracies and paranoia. There are some people that hate government so bad, they begin to turn on our military, disrespecting our police, because I hate government so bad. That's an extremism I'm not going to adopt and be a part of. 569-1080, 569-1080. Love to hear from you this morning. Let's go to Rod. Good morning, Rod.
Good morning. See, my only problem with Walker is if you actually Google his interview, he had an interview on immigration, and he's pretty anti-deportation.
Yeah.
And I think he needs to clarify a lot on his views.
You talking about Scott Walker?
Yes, Scott Walker.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's something you need to research.
So what was his position? How did he justify that?
He didn't get into it a whole lot. It was basically a liberal media that was
okay.
Asking him, so they didn't give him a lot of time to qualify it, but his stance, what he put on it was that he doesn't believe in deporting, illegal immigrants.
So what's he want to do with them?
Didn't say.
That's
part of that. He needs to elaborate on what his stance on that is. What I like about Ted Cruz, I don't agree with everything Ted Cruz has to say.
Yeah.
But everything he said he's going to do, he has done.
As far
And
as
that is a rarity among politicians.
yeah,
And that's one of the things I like about him. As far as Mitch McConnell and all those people, when you put up show votes saying, well, I'm going to stop, Obamacare, and
Yeah.
then you vote for budgets and vote for judges and rubber stamp things like that are pro doing that kind of stuff, your show vote doesn't really mean anything. So to me, they're hypocrites and liars.
Well, it's political posturing at the very least.
Well, at the very least, but if you're a liar, you're a liar. I don't care how you paint it,
I'm looking here. Here's what Scott Walker said. He said multiple times in an interview that he wants more information, and he said he's not advocating for deportation. So you're right about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my view on the things that you covered so far. I just joined your show, so
yeah. Well, thank you. He did,
and welcome back. By the way,
thank you.
I remember your old show back before Murkowski got elected again.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Rod. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Walker. I mean, Scott Walker did say that he is not for amnesty. Walker said, "I think we need to secure our borders." He's not advocating deportation. This was CBS News with the interview, but he is also not. Here's the gist. Well, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker won't say that he's running for Republican nomination. Well, this is actually back in this is February. So this was yesterday. Okay, Walker told ABC this week that he opposes amnesty for illegal aliens, and he says the U.S. needs to go beyond just aggressive airstrikes in an effort to defeat ISIL. Yeah. So anyway, on immigration, Walker said, "I think for sure we need to secure the border. I think we need to enforce the legal system. I'm not for amnesty. I'm not an advocate of the plans that have been pushed here in Washington. And I think, should I become a candidate, because I'm not yet, it's part of the exploratory process here. That is something we're going to lay out plans for the future. But we've got to have healthy balance. We're a country both of immigrants and of laws. We can't ignore the laws in this country. Can't ignore the people who come in, whether it's from Mexico or Central America." Walker said he's not advocating deportation. Here's what he said. "I'm saying in the end, we need to enforce the laws in the United States, and we need to find a way for people to have a legitimate legal immigration system in this country. And that does not mean amnesty." Yeah. So it's I suppose it's a little waffle, but the idea of deporting everyone who's here now illegally is not doable. I mean, I suppose it's doable, but politically it's suicide. Practicality does play a role in life, And if you're going to stand on principles for principle's sake, sometimes, and I'm not talking about right or wrong here. I'm not talking about do something immoral. But sometimes in the political realm, you have to pick your battles. And if the Republican Party were to become the party that said every person here who's here illegally must leave now, unfortunately, folks, the reality of that situation is the Republican Party would never win an election again, at least not in the next 50 years. Because the reality of the situation, the political landscape in America is that we are playing a game. We're battling the left, the right versus the left. That's the game. The referees, the media, call plays very differently for the left than they do the right. If someone's pinky grabs the jersey of someone on the left, it's a major scandal, and they're going to penalize them. If someone on the left who's supposed to just block actually tackles the defender before the ball comes, then there's going to be no call. We're playing with referees who don't play fair. So we have to be very careful as the movement that promotes freedom to be very wise because the left will come after us in the media and they will not touch their own. I saw that Alice Rogoff, publisher of the Alaska Dispatch, she was speaking at a conference in Seattle this weekend. And I don't mind people becoming wealthy and buying newspapers. That's fine. Good for you. Congratulations. You made the money. You can spend it however you want. And that I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying, well, she shouldn't be able to own her own newspaper. But this weekend, speaking at an Arctic meeting in Seattle, here's what Rogoff said. She said, I bought a newspaper and I'm now in the messaging business. Well, that's very different than journalism. If you think for a second that Alice Rogoff and her leftist team at the Alaska Dispatch News is not about forming your opinion instead of informing you, you are sadly mistaken. So we just have to be aware of this stuff. We just have to be aware that the field's tilted, the rules aren't fair, but that's okay. We have truth. We have truth. Freedom is the best route, not control. Freedom versus control. That's the battlegrounds. They're promoting centralization of power and control. We're promoting freedom. Freedom will win out. Freedom will win out. I don't care how slanted it is. I don't care how they try to thwart freedom. People will always gravitate toward freedom if given a chance. So let's keep the fight. Let's keep going. Don't get discouraged. You pick up the Alaska Dispatch News, you get discouraged. Don't let them influence you. The freedom message will prevail. This is America. This is a country built on a love and reverence for freedom. That's the foundation of this nation. We are not like Europe, where they want to centralize power, take away your freedom, take away your ability to create wealth for you and your family. That's not who we are as Americans. 6:58, Dan Fagan Show. 6 minutes past 7 o'clock. Good morning to you. Dan Fagan Show. Broadcasting to you on KOAN in Anchorage, 95.1 FM, and then 1080 AM. You can also get us on KVNT in the Valley, 92.5 FM and 1020 AM. Or you can check us out, danfaganshow.us. Love stories like this. This is a woman in Nebraska, 56 years old, hospitalized, got the flu. She was so sick she fell into a coma. Her liver and kidney shut down. Her condition continued to deteriorate. So her family eventually decided, well, let's just take her off the ventilator. The doctors were convinced that there was no hope, her family said, and delivered the news to us that we would lose our beloved Terry. Just hours before they were going to pull the plug. Just hours. Terry woke up. Ryan Roberts, her son, said for whatever reason, it wasn't her time yet. She just magically woke up about 4 hours before we took her off life support. Love that. Never give up. Never give up. 569-1080, 569-1080. That is the telephone number if you'd like to be a part of the broadcast. Joe, good morning.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I was listening to you guys talking about the presidency and stuff, and I want to go back to the Super Bowl just for a second. And I didn't watch it.
Okay.
But when I was out bidding jobs, I could see through people's windows as I was driving on their big screen TVs that everybody else was watching it.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you have 3 downs on goal, you protect the ball and you keep punching it in, and to throw it away like Seattle did, my jaw is sitting on the floor right now.
You know how many times Seattle was first and goal on the 1 this season?
How many?
5. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. There were 5 times that Seattle was first and goal on the 1 in which they gave the ball to Marshawn Lynch. You know how many of those 5 times he scored?
He's the running back?
Yeah.
Well, being that you brought it up, I might say all of them.
1.
1.
Once.
Well, maybe they were worried about that then, huh?
Well, I would think that they would know that more than the average fan.
Let's go to the presidency.
Okay.
I'm looking at CNN poll here on the important states like Pennsylvania, and they've got Hillary Clinton here winning all those states except for Florida, where she's tied with Jeb Bush. And I think, and that doesn't mean I'm going to vote for her, but I think it may be attributed to the women vote and the Mexican vote.
Well, the thing about elections is that the polls that are done before the Republicans get their message out are always askew, because the media will just praise Hillary and demonize the Republicans. But once the Republicans begin to actually campaign and point out Hillary's dismal record as Secretary of State, dismal record as Secretary of Defense, then people begin to go, well, maybe this Hillary isn't that good. So you can never, it's like when Begich was up double digits before the Sullivan race, before Sullivan started his campaign. If you just listen to the media, you're just going to get the left side of the viewpoint. So those polls don't mean much to me, Joe.
They're like push polls.
Well, no, it's just that the look, if all the people of America get is their news from the media, that they're always going to be favoring the leftist candidate. But once the right candidate begins to point out, and by right I mean right of center, begins to point out their viewpoints and how the leftists and what they're really about, then these polls usually come back around.
I was going to vote for Walker.
Oh, Scott Walker?
No, Bill Walker.
You did vote for Bill Walker.
No, maybe Scott Walker. I don't know. I just want to see some discipline and control and some law and order instead of people just piling over the borders, and the Mexicans especially. And you know what? The thing is there's other people besides Mexicans that want to come in this country. And there's no bigger theft, Dan, than the theft of stepping in front of people that are legally signed up to immigrate to the United States.
Now, when you say Mexicans especially, why do you say that?
Because they are the ones that got, if they were to show now that the ones that have been here the last 5 years illegally, their birth certificate, they are immune from being deported because of Obama's.
But it's not as though you're not singling out the Mexicans because of their race. You're singling out them because of their proximity to the border, which is wide open.
Which shouldn't matter at all, because it should be, if somebody from Finland wants to come here, they should have just as much of a right to come in as the Mexicans.
And there's been documentations that many people from the Middle East have come down to the Mexican border and come into our country via that border because it's wide open.
Right. And then they bring their Muslim religion with them, and then they start doing things, and they start getting in the military. Then they start blowing up our people and throwing a hand grenade in a tent. And then it's just, I want to see some law and order, and I don't care who's president, as long as there's some discipline. And I don't want to see the United States become where everybody in every country just piles in, uses up our resources, depletes our culture.
Well, Joe, we're gonna have a very interesting discussion on immigration coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. You want to stay tuned for that. 569-1080. Bill, you're on.
I'm not quite catching the correlation there between the Mexicans invading and the Finnish not having the same rights to get into the country here, I guess. But I look forward to your debate there on the immigration. I missed that first part, talking about the Seahawks game the other day. I thought another interesting stat there, Dan. 164 times this year, the ball has been on the 1 yard line for a team.
Yes.
Of those 164 times passed, 93 of them turned into touchdowns. The other 42 or whatnot dropped balls. One interception, and that was the Super Bowl.
Wow.
One time.
There's a stat for you.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's sickening, but you know what? He had the right package. They had the fat guys out there, man. They were ready for they were ready for Marshawn to pound it in. They had the two open guys on the outside. That was just an unbelievable play by that rookie.
Well, to see Pete Carroll's reaction when he literally just fell to the ground.
Oh yeah. But everybody forgets it was Bevel that made the call.
Yeah.
The OC, and Marshawn signed off. They do have seconds, and look what has happened when they've given Brady, or I don't know, a couple of years ago his freshman year. Remember the Atlanta game to go to the NFC Championship?
Yep.
Gave Matt Ryan 37 seconds. He marches down to win.
Yep. Hey, thanks for the call. I got a break here. Appreciate your call though. 569-1080, 714 Dan Fagan Show. All right, 7:16 in the morning, Dan Fagan Show right here on KOAN in Anchorage, KVNT in the Valley. You can also find us on the website, danfagan.us, where we are streaming, and we are streaming video and audio. How about that? On the interweb, as they call it. Our telephone number, 569-1080, 569-1080. And you can email me, Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com, Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Interesting discussion coming up on immigration. I think you're going to enjoy it in the next hour. You know, I was thinking a lot about the owner state over the weekend, and I still don't. You know, I read Wally Hickle's book, Crisis in the Commons, and I've had people try to explain it to me. I know Ethan Berkowitz's wife, I think she did a paper on this, and maybe we need to get her. I think we had her on the old TV show to try to get her to explain it to me. I still don't. I don't see how it's anything but a trusting of the government sector over the private sector. That just seems to be, to me, what the owner state's all about. And I've had Wally Hickle on my show many times in the past on the old show, talking about the owner state and this collectivism. This, I tell you, we had a couple of legislators from North Dakota on the show, on the old TV show I did, and they were here when things were just exploding down there. And one of them told me that the owner state concept was explained to him. And as he understood it, he thought that would, if North Dakota had the same type mentality in its constitution, then what happened in North Dakota would have never happened as far as the boom, because there's no private land ownership. So I'm not a fan of the owner state. And maybe I'm just slow. Maybe I don't get it. People talk about it like it's some mystical thing, with spiritual powers. And it just it just seems like socialism at best, communism at worst. Because you and I don't own it. The people who's in charge of the state, they're the ones who own the stuff. You only own something when you can sell it. So I don't get it. And I understand the backbone movement, the Wally Hickle movement, the Bill Walker movement embraces the owner state. But my fear is that it will lead to what we've seen in Norway. In Norway, they're very, Alice Rogoff and her leftist team over there at the Dispatch, they're very deceptive when they sing the praises of the Norway model. Yes, they have a $350 billion permanent fund. Well, first of all, they put every dime of the money they make in oil into that fund. They don't pay a check. They don't give their people a check. They have huge taxes over there, massive taxes. And yet they're still $350 billion in debt. So you can have $350 billion in the bank, but if you also have $350 billion in debt, you ain't got jack. So the idea that the Norway model, which has this gigantic welfare state, huge taxes, and a permanent fund that really doesn't mean anything because the debt cancels it. But that's the model, it appears to me, that Mr. Walker favors. He's brought delegations over there. The whole people over at Commonwealth North, they're always bringing legislators over there. Hey, look at what they do over here. I just don't see it any other way than socialism. And now you've got Mr. Walker thwarting the private sector last week. Hillcorp, big player, major oil company, wants to build an LNG plant at Port McKenzie, wants to truck gas up to Fairbanks. Walker comes in and says, no, we want the government to do that. We want Ada to do that. We want Ada to spend the money. Literally thwarting the private sector at the last minute before Hillcorp was about to make a deal. Now, that's the owner state. We all own the resources collectively, so the government should be in charge. When Mr. Walker says he wants the pipeline 52% owned by the state, that's the owner state. The government needs to be in charge. When you own 52% of something, you own 100% of something. For all practical purposes, when it comes to the decision-making process. You don't get 100% of the benefit of owning it, but you get to make all the decisions because you own 52%. For those who went to school in public schools, 52% is a majority. A majority it's higher than 50. 50 plus 1 is higher than, they call it the majority. So this is where we really are now. And, you know, there's a big sign, all these signs with the backbone people and Malcolm Roberts, who's now kind of the de facto leader of the backbone movement now that Mr. Hickel has died. But you know, we're talking about people like Bob Lester and Malcolm Roberts and Bill Walker. These guys are all about the owner state. They're all about the government versus the private sector. Big labor, right there in with them. Vince Beltrami, major player in the backbone movement. Obviously, the more control the government has, the more power unions have. The more control the private sector has, the less power unions have. So I'm just trying to paint a picture for you, folks. And no one else is telling you this. I don't know. I don't listen right now. Maybe Rick is. He's on the same time as me. And I know Dave Steeren is. Steeren's all over this. But this is a big deal. And this is what we're going to get out of this governor over the next 4 years, the owner state mentality. Anytime there's a choice between the private sector having power or the government sector having power, it appears that our current governor is going to take the government sector option because it centralizes power and it falls under the philosophy of the owner state. And I know a lot of Alaskans, they've just kind of grown up because the media is very left-leaning, that we have a great constitution and the owner state is so wonderful. I would beg to disagree. I think we have a horrific constitution. And I believe the owner state concept has been tried and tested and has failed consistently throughout history. I understand it's controversial. I'm not attacking Wally Hickel. I'm not attacking the backbone people, Malcolm Roberts, these guys. I'm sure they're sincere. I'm sure they believe what they believe is in the best interest of Alaska. I don't doubt that for a minute. But if we do go the way of Norway, which is what our current governor seems to favor, which is what the movement that he's coming from seems to favor. Les Guerra loves the owner state. Hollis French loves the owner state concept. All these lefties, they love the owner state concept. Well, of course they do. It's socialism. It's exactly what they're fighting for. The government centralizing power. So my word of advice would be let's watch. Let's watch. And we've already got a couple of examples. We have the thing that happened last week where Hillcorp was ready to build an LNG plant. Big oil company, go build a big LNG plant in Port McKenzie. And Walker has his attorney general, former law partner, go to RCA to block it. And then he brings in Ada, the state agency, and tells them to go spend a bunch of money on this and let the government handle it. That's huge. Alice Rogoff won't report it. I've asked her why. She won't respond. That's a massive story. And then you've got Walker saying that he wants 52% of the ownership of the pipeline, although he's kind of been ambivalent about it since the election. So we're going to watch those things very closely, and you should too. And I'd like to see some of the mainstream media people learn about the interstate and what it's really about and figure out that this is what this governor is promoting. So they'll be able to see it. They'll be able to recognize it when they see it. Most reporters don't have the first clue what the interstate's all about, especially on TV. Many, people who are experienced, like Rhonda McBride, she over at Channel 11, she knows what it's about, and she, of course, I would imagine, being a hard left center gal, would embrace the interstate concept. I don't know for sure, but I've had many discussions with Rhonda in the past, and just about everything that came out of her mouth was in favor of left of center positions. She's a great reporter, by the way. But that's what she's been trained. She's been trained to be a leftist. I don't fault her. She's a wonderful person. So let's just watch out. Let's just watch the governor and just keep in mind, why would he go with the government there instead of the private sector? Well, let's just judge him in that light. Let's evaluate his policies in that light. Why would he pick the government over the private sector? Because what I believe, ladies and gentlemen, is that the private sector wins every time. When you have a choice between going with the private sector or the government, just about every case, the private sector is going to be your best option. Just about every case. There may be a couple of exceptions, but there aren't many. So let's watch for that. And let's keep this in. When you talk to your legislators, say, hey, are you an interstate guy too or gal? Are you going to help the governor turn us into more of an interstate where the private sector is thwarted and the government has more control? Ask your legislators that. Tell them you're watching. Tell them you're on to what's going on down there. And whose side are you on, Mr. or Mrs. Legislator? 569-1080. 569-1080. That's the number. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com is where you email me. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Dan Fagan, Fagan is how you spell Fagan. Stay with us. good friend Keith Montauk, especially Truck and Auto. He's a mechanic you can trust. Keith has got great team over there. And look, if you're bringing your vehicle in and you need to have peace of mind, right? Because let's face it, they can really take advantage of you. Mechanics can, but that's the beauty of Keith Montauk. He's establishing the community. We all know him very well. Does so much for our veterans, and he's just a great guy. He will take care of you. He will make sure you get good value for your repair dollar. That's Keith Montauk, especially Truck and Auto. He's located right across the street from the Long Branch Saloon, right off of Abbott. And I'll give you his number, and you can call him. 349-1637. 349-1637. If you tell him you heard it from me, he will give you a free lollipop, chocolate. 349-1637. Tell him Dan Fagan sent you. Our number 569-1080. 569-1080. This is a really good debate in which you can see how people could come down on either side. So there's this vaccination debate. You've heard of this. The measles is one example. Some of the celebrities. I just love Jim Carrey and what's that other gal's name? This blonde haired gal. Their brains are very small, and I shouldn't say that, but it's typically true. I mean, what's the deal with a celebrity? You literally, for a living, memorize lines and pretend to be somebody else, and that makes you an expert on things. Why isn't that celebrities testify before Congress? They literally pretend to be someone else. They memorize lines. That's what they do for a job. And they're going to come out in front of Congress and tell us. So these it's called celebrity science now. They've got a name for it. So some of these celebrities come out and said, well, vaccinations are terrible, and they'll lead your kid will have, all kinds of diseases, and it'll cause your child to be dyslexic and all this stuff. Well, the scientists are pretty upset about it, and now a disease that we've almost completely eradicated, measles, as a result of this celebrity science, is beginning to make a comeback because some parents are deciding not to have their kids vaccinated. So it's a big deal because here's the question. Measles was horrible. When I had measles when I was a kid, I had mumps also. I think I had measles. I know I had mumps for sure. Or maybe I had chicken pox. I don't know. But, when I was in my age, I'm 54 now. When you're my age, back then, everybody got these things because they just didn't have the vaccinations that they do now. And the disease is completely gone almost. Well, now, because of the celebrity science, more and more people are beginning to get these diseases. And then all of a sudden, measles is making a comeback. A disease we had all, for all practical purposes, completely eradicated. So the question is, do we allow parents the right to say, no, I don't want my kid to get vaccinated, and then have that child go into school and infect other kids? It's an amazing debate on the power of the state and parental choice and all this stuff. Well, here's Chris Christie kind of stepped in it yesterday. He was visiting a vaccine laboratory, and he called for, here's his quote, some measure of choice on whether shots guarding against measles and other diseases should be required for children. And then Rand Paul, who he's a conspiracy guy because his dad is, also spoke out on it and said vaccines should be voluntary, citing many tragic cases of walking, talking, normal children who wound up with profound mental disorders after vaccines. Paul said the state does not own your children. Parents own the children, and it is an issue of freedom and public health. Well, Paul's right about that, but if your child is going to carry a disease because you saw, Jim Carrey tell you on The View that it's not a good idea to have a vaccine, and your child leads to another child because their parent wouldn't give a vaccine to their kid. All of a sudden, measles is a problem again in our country. Is it responsible for the parent to allow all these kids to get sick because they believe Jim Carrey? Yesterday, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention said that more than 100 cases of the highly infectious disease was diagnosed in January. Most of those cases were linked to people who visited Disneyland in California. Now, this was this guy who had this study. Of course, it's been debunked. That's the one all the celebrities attach themselves to. Amish Agila, an infectious disease physician at the University of Pittsburgh, said, when you see educated people or elected officials giving credence to things that have been completely debunked, an idea that has been shown to be responsible for multiple measles outbreaks in recent years, it's very concerning. He called the comments from Paul particularly troubling because Paul is a doctor. Christie's aides were quick to clarify his remarks, insisting in his statement that the Republican governor believes vaccines are an important public health protection. So that's the question, though. Do we force parents to administer a vaccine to their kids? And if we don't force parents to vaccinate their kids, do we allow them into the public school system where the unvaccinated children could resurrect a disease that has already been eradicated? Another thing, people who have been vaccinated, like I was when I was a kid, the vaccination can wear off when you get into your 50s, 60s, and 70s. So if this disease is resurrected because parents won't vaccinate their kids, it could begin to affect people who are middle-aged or elderly. It's a tough debate. 569-1080, 569-1080, if you'd like to weigh in. Should parents be forced to vaccinate their kids? Just that sentence alone, as a conservative, it makes you cringe, doesn't it? Because you want freedom. You don't want the government telling you what to do with your body or your kids. But then what about public health? Do we want measles coming back, as it apparently is, because of celebrity journalism? 569-1080, 569-1080. We're gonna take a quick break. We'll take your calls on this topic. We got some calls backing up. Should the government force you to get your child vaccinated for the cause of public health? We'll take your calls after this. 569-1080. Dan Fagan Show, KOAN, KVNT. We are streaming live on danfagan.us. Current temperature in Anchorage, 10 degrees. 3 degrees in Wasilla, 7 in Palmer. Give us a call, 569-1080, 569-1080. We'll take a quick break. Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back. All right, 746, Dan Fagan Show, broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT, streaming live on danfagan.us. I want to tell you about our good friend Mike Daniels, who is the head of Country Financial here in Alaska. Mike and his team, they've been helping out folks in Alaska plan for their retirement for years. There are 13 Country Financial locations in Alaska, 5 in the Valley, 5 in Anchorage. Go see Mike Daniels and his team. Go see a country representative. You'll be thrilled you did. They know so much about financial planning, and it'll be well worth your time to make an appointment. Here's the number. 866 country. 866 country financial. Our number 569-1080. 569-1080. That's the telephone number. If you'd like to join the broadcast, email me, danfaganshow at iCloud.com. danfaganshow at iCloud.com. Talking about this vaccination debate. Should parents be forced by the government to vaccinate their children, even if not vaccinating your child could lead to the resurrection of some diseases that have been formally eradicated? Chris Christie and Rand Paul took some heat over the weekend, saying the government, questioning whether the government should be involved in that. Rand Paul went a little bit further, saying that these vaccinations could harm your child. It's a tough issue. It's a tough issue. The problem is celebrities, they take these causes on because I don't want to assign motive to them, but I think, if I was somebody who had to, for a living, pretend to be somebody else and memorize lines, I think I'd have a self-confidence problem. I just don't think I'd feel that good about myself. It's not really a good job. And I'm not trying to look, if you're an actor or an actor wannabe, I'm not trying to put down your profession, but I mean, let's face it. You basically go to work and you read a script and you memorize that script and you put makeup on and you put costumes on and you try to pretend like the person in the script is you. People love actors. If George Clooney or Brad Pitt were to walk down 4th Avenue today, people would mob them. I don't understand it. They're just memorizing lines. But when these actors get in front of committees in Congress and complain about vaccines, what do they know? There was this one study out of Texas several years ago, but apparently it's been debunked. And now, because of all the hysteria and fear over vaccinations, we're beginning to see measles break out again, a disease that had, for the most part, been eradicated. So, I'm as freedom-oriented as you'll ever get, but at some point, do you need to say to the government, does the government need to come in and say, you know what? Like, and I don't get flu vaccinations. I don't get the flu vaccination. I just don't do it. Now, I've gotten the flu. I got the flu once, and it was when I was working in Texas for a TV station. And you know what I did? The first day I got the flu, I stayed home, and I stayed home until I got better. Now, that's irresponsible. Getting the flu and insisting on working. Of course, those who've had the flu know you can't work. It's just brutal. But I've never gotten a flu vaccine. And I suppose you could say, well, Dan, maybe you could spread the flu then. Well, I suppose. But not if I stay home. 569-1080. 569-1080. That's the number to join the broadcast if you'd like to. And again, you can email me, danfaganshow at iCloud.com. danfaganshow at iCloud.com. Let's go to Greg. Greg, you're on.
Dan, you're right. This is a very complex issue. I'd like to break it down to communicable diseases versus things like cancer, treatment for kids that are not of age to decide, that aren't communicable diseases, forcing them to go under chemotherapy. There's two different issues here entirely, but underlying both of them is the ability for the parents to choose what's right for non-consensual age children, basically. And so what's your feeling on the government being able to be allowed to do it with things like, forcing chemotherapy, for instance, that for cancer patients?
So if you're saying like if it's a 10-year-old and the parents say, I don't want my child to go through chemo, but the doctor says, well, your child's going to die if they don't, then should the government step in and force the child? Is that your point?
That's the question, because that's not a communicable disease. You see the difference in the argument is huge, because
I agree. So what do you? Well, wow. So do you usurp the freedom of the parent to choose for their kid medically when the boy, that's a tough one, Greg.
Well, and I'll tell you, a lot of the times the chemotherapy does not work,
right,
and somebody's life that otherwise would have been better left in the hands of God is made miserable until they die.
Yeah.
And the government, if the government's given the power to insist that happens, that's a problem. And I think that's part of the thinking that folks like Rand Paul or whatever are trying to interject into the argument.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, but then again, the other side, which would be the anti-Rand Paul argument, is it's just pretty clear. Yes, it's true that chemo doesn't always work, but the doctor who you would think would know best, he or she wouldn't prescribe it if they didn't think it was the best course of action, right?
Well, two things here. Why don't you get Dr. Alona Farr, right here in Alaska, on the phone to kind of chime in on that?
Yeah.
And, that might be just something to consider. And
but you believe the government should not be able to force the parents to force the child to get chemo?
Well, I don't think that it's the government's job. But
what about those? Because I know there's a religion. I don't know. I
know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's Christian Science. They do not.
Right.
They do not allow any kind of medical treatment, or even like I think the Seventh-day Adventists will not allow blood transfusion. So if a child clearly would be saved by a blood transfusion, should the parents be able to let the child die because of their religious beliefs, or should the government step in there?
Well, that would have to be an individual case that we look at, on those
What
terms.
would you say?
Well, I don't know, really. It's a difficult discussion that we're having here. Let me interject something else here real quick. If a kid that was not vaccinated for, the topic is measles, right?
Yep.
Goes to school, public school, let's say, and he is put in a room with a mix of kids that were vaccinated and some that weren't.
Yeah.
Who are the folks that are going to get the measles, right? Not the ones that are vaccinated. So if you think about it here, the folks that won't vaccinate their kids, if in fact that's the argument, are the only ones at risk.
That's
so if
good.
the argument is, if they don't vaccinate it, they'll come in and make my kids sick. Well, if he got the vaccination, that should not be true.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
So
just it's the old, hey, it's like, I don't mind the Patriot Act. I'm not going to be calling any terrorists. I don't mind if the kids don't get vaccinated. My kid's safe because he was vaccinated.
Yeah, see, you said it earlier, Dan. This is a very deep, very intense subject here. There's not a simple answer for this at all.
Well, the reason it's so controversial now, Greg, is because the government has shown a propensity to so step over the line when it comes to us raising our kids.
Absolutely.
Your 13-year-old daughter can go get an abortion without you knowing about it. That's how far the government has gone in this realm. And that's why I think people like Rand Paul and others are almost, and I don't want to say paranoid, but are very, 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 very worried about the government and how it relates to raising kids.
And so am I.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's, look, the idea, ladies and gentlemen, and I remember Hall's French blocked this in the Senate committee. It was so sad. The idea that Hollis French thinks that your 13-year-old daughter, 13, should be able to walk into an abortion clinic without you ever knowing about it. That's just amazing to me. Have a major medical procedure you'll never be the wiser for. Could you imagine favoring something like that? Being so committed to the death culture. Your allegiance to the death culture is so strong that you're allowing a 13-year-old girl to get a major medical procedure. And you never know about it as a parent, as a parent, as a parent. I just don't get that kind of thinking. And I suppose Hollis French is sincere in his total and complete dedication to the furtherance of the death culture. But I just don't get it. I just do not begin to comprehend how you think that's wisdom. Preventing parents from even knowing if their children are having abortions. Do not get it. I'll never understand that. I'll never begin to understand that. All right, very interesting topic coming up on immigration. We're going to talk to Ruben Reyes, who is going to come in here and talk about his view on immigration. You're going to want to pay attention. You're going to want to listen. It's going to be exciting. He's a very intelligent young man. You may agree with him. You may not. Stay tuned. Dan Fagan Show. right here. Dan Fagan Show, 6 minutes past 8 o'clock. Broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT. Also streaming live, danfagan.us. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. Put those headsets on there, Ruben, if you don't mind. Happy to welcome here in the studio this morning, Ruben Reyes. How are you, Ruben?
I'm doing good this morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's good to have you here. And you posted something on Facebook. And just for people who don't know who you are, just give us kind of a...
I've been here in Alaska since 2001. I've been a youth pastor, been a business owner here in the city of Anchorage. I was subcontracting out of the Anchorage airport in the past, and that's just kind of some of my local story. Been in ministry up here, and just.
And what are you doing now?
I'm actually in transition. We had been on staff at a church in Wasilla for 5 years, and we just transitioned out of that and trying to figure out the next thing.
Well, it's great to have you here, and you put a post on Facebook that really caught my eye, and I want to ask you a little bit about it. I'm going to read some of it, and you're talking about basically immigration is the gist of the post. Fair?
Yeah. Yep.
Young people, don't be upset at slavery from the past. Conservatives, don't be upset at illegal aliens being in your country. You put "your" in parentheses. See, kids, in 2015 America still has a slavery problem, and it'll never be fixed until your parents, neighbors, and fellow Americans are willing to pay $6 to $9 for their fruits and vegetables. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, just kind of digging into the concept a little bit. What I see is this: I look at the illegal immigrant or illegal alien issue, and I see it as like a straw man argument. It has a lot of different aspects and angles, but we never look at them because we don't promote critical thinking. What we promote in America is we promote people going after an agenda or going after a political hot topic. But the reality is when we're looking at illegal immigration or the illegal alien issue, we're avoiding the real issue, and we're just like hitting at this thing that won't go away. And it benefits the Democratic Party for it not to go away. And the Republicans stand on this value that we need to get rid of it and everything else, but they don't push to get anything really fixed. Because like you look at it and we have this situation where if you're an immigrant coming into the US, you have one party that's saying, we are against you, you need to go. And you have another party that's saying, we are for you.
If you're an illegal immigrant.
Yeah, even with the illegal. Yeah, because you still hear it. You still hear the communication. And so when those people become naturalized citizens, you have one person who said they were against you and another person who said they're for you. Which party are you going to support?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But is it fair? Because I would think that someone who goes through the proper process,
Absolutely,
files all the paperwork, gets in line, does everything that they need to do to qualify to get in our country, I would think those folks would actually favor the Republican philosophy, which is let's encourage legal immigration and discourage illegal immigration.
Okay. Well, I think some of it is how do we get that to hit the grassroots? And the reason I say that is this is like when I'm on Facebook, I'm connected to over 3,000 people on Facebook, and probably 2/3 of them are conservative. And so when a certain, a hornet's nest gets stirred, all of a sudden this stuff that I'm reading on Facebook is we need to build walls. We need to send the illegals back out. And all this different stuff like that. And the communication at the grassroots level is communication that would be inflammatory.
So the perception is we're just against all immigrants.
I don't know that that's necessarily the perception. I don't think I'd ever had a conversation with a conservative that would have vocalized that.
No, I'm not talking about conservatives' perception. I'm talking about the immigrant's perception, even if they went through the rules.
Absolutely. I think that would be the perception of the immigrant that they're
legal or otherwise, because conservatives are against us.
Yeah, because they're hearing the argument and they're not hearing it from the standpoint that a conservative is really speaking it from.
So what before we talk about perception and arguments, let me just get where you're coming from, or where you think we should be on immigration. What should we do? about immigration in this country, illegal immigration first.
Okay. Well, in all honesty, I'll be really honest. I don't care if we go ahead and have the illegals leave the country or if they stay in the country and become legalized. My problem is that there's no action to bring solution to the problem. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. So we have these illegals that are here in the country. They're everywhere. If you go into Washington, they're working in the apple orchards. In California, the strawberry fields. And Idaho,
they estimate up to 20 million.
Exactly. 20 million illegal aliens
Right.
is not a small number.
Right.
And if you talk to anybody in those local communities, they go, oh, this is a home where they live. This is a factory where they work. Everybody locally knows that. But how is it then that our local law enforcement, our local mayors and governors and senators and our states don't recognize that? Does that make sense?
That it's being ignored.
It's totally being ignored on a local or regional and national level.
I think that's probably true for the most part. So what's your solution? What do you think we should do?
I think if we're looking at a solution for the problem, is this: you can't stop the bleeding in the context of people coming across the border and coming in because they're finding employment. Like if you live in a country where it were to cross over in GDP to like $1 a day of American wages or $10 a day of American wages, and you come in here and you make like 60, well, that's good business. All of a sudden you're like, man, I'm making 6 times what I was making back home. Why wouldn't I cross this border and make it happen?
And if you bring your kids, they get educated for free, healthcare's free, they get a free cell phone, apartments free, everything's free. So even if you don't work, you still get everything. But what's your solution?
Well, I think
is this working, this mic still? Brian, can you hear me? Hey, Brian, is this mic working? I'm not hearing it. Yeah, we don't. I can hear me, and we can't hear his mic. You want to try another mic, or is that not working? There we go. There we go. Perfect.
Okay. So I would say that I think part of the solution is this: instead of making issue and fighting the tide of people coming in, make it really heavy on businesses that employ illegal aliens.
So find them.
Absolutely. Like the reality is if we're going to solve the problem, rather we legalize them or we deport them. That's not the real issue. If we legalize them, then we still need to have these things in place so that it stops people coming illegally.
We're talking. I would just let people know who you are. We're talking to Ruben Reyes about immigration. So that's one of the approaches that's recommended, and I think that would be something that would work. But there are a lot of immigrants, Ruben, who come here because they get everything free.
Yeah,
they get literally all their needs. If they're living in a dirt floor in Mexico, the Mexican government's not feeding them. It's not paying their rent. So what do you do about those folks?
Well, I don't think they're coming here just because of that. I think there's peripheral reasons, and I think the American dollar ties into that really strong.
Let me take a quick break. We'll continue this discussion. Plus, we'll take your phone calls, 569-1080, 569-1080. Ruben Reyes is our guest. Time currently 8:14. All right, 8:16 in the morning, Dan Fagan show. Good morning to you. We're talking to Ruben Reyes about immigration. Ruben is a former youth pastor. He's a minister working out in the Valley. We will take your calls here in a second, 569-1080. I just want to get back to, we're trying to get handle where Ruben stands, then we'll take your calls. So your position when it talks about illegal immigration, illegal now, we're talking about illegal, not legal.
Yeah.
First thing you'd do to crack down on it would be go after businesses that hire illegal immigrants. And the second thing, my question to you was, what about, if you're, let's just say you're a mom and you got 3 kids and you're living in a dirt floor in Mexico in literally with barely a hut. And you realize if you can somehow get into this country, your kids will get a great education. All their health care is free. They'll get a check for food. They'll get money for rent. Everything will be taken care of. If you crack down on businesses, what would prevent that woman and her 3 kids to come in and search for a better life here in America?
Well, I guess some of the question would be, how would she get access to some of those free dollars if they didn't have a means to provide the meals for themselves today and tomorrow?
In Anchorage School District, they don't ask you about if you're a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the benefits that you get, they don't check that stuff. The government these days it really seems to be in the recruiting of dependents business. They really promote whether it's a free cell phone, whether it's the EBT card, where you get free food. The government doesn't seem to be interested in whether or not you're a citizen. They want you to have whatever you need, which I suppose if someone's hungry, they should be fed. So those kind of folks, and I agree with you. I don't know for a fact. I don't think that's the majority of people breaking into this country. But how would you fix that problem?
Honestly, I probably haven't really considered that one. I guess some of what I'd look at, Dan, is I think what we have in America as a core problem, and it's a little off topic, is a critical thinking problem, because we don't know how to see things from the other perspective. And so you have conservatives that only see things from their view and liberals that only see things from their view. And without seeing things from the other perspective, we're not asking the right questions.
569-1080, 569-1080. If you'd like to speak with Ruben, talking about immigration, let's go to Monica. Monica, you're on.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
I'm at some point I was illegal in this country. Now I'm a professional. I totally agree what you guys are saying. It's not about people coming and adding walls and making strong laws of immigration. It's about your country offers all what we don't have. There's no choice for people in Mexico. People want to work. There's no work. There's no choice. So if your country is offering, of course they're going to come. And I'm very, very proud of that people that try to find a different choice for their families. And they come here and sometimes they take the jobs that people don't want to take here.
Yep.
So I totally agree. If we want to legalize people, that's fine. But I think to prevent people from coming, there needs to be no offer. The problem is offer.
Let me ask you this, Monica, because there's a lot of people when they talk about the immigration issue, they talk about it in terms of the lifeboat and the Titanic. We're $18 trillion in debt right now in our country. That's money that will have to be paid back by 2 and 3 generations. We're broke. We're printing money. Unemployment is through the roof. If we keep letting people pour into our borders, eventually this lifeboat that is the United States of America, will it not sink?
That's a hard question. I agree that there's a lot of unemployment here, but there's also a lot of people that do not want to do the work that Mexicans want to do. So it's a very difficult question, because in one hand, the Mexicans come and they're producing for you and they're making money for you. I know they get a lot of the benefits that they're not paying taxes, and it's a big problem. But the reality is, like, if your country is offering that job and no one else is taking them, the Mexicans will take that job because they don't have any other choice. So I think, as you mentioned earlier, it's important that it gets enforced from the side of the employers to make it work. I mean, there's an offer. Mexicans will always take it.
Monica, I appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Ruben, what's your thought?
Well, I just want to address like even your question there. My question in response would be, are illegals the problem to the American economy? And I would propose that they're not. Like for me, the proposal of the economy issue is a better one. Is government fat? And yes, in America, government is fat. I've heard it said, and so I'm not citing a source, but I've heard it said that government is the single largest employer in our country. And if you own a business, you have to generate revenue to have employees. So my question is, where does the American government generate its revenue?
Well, from the people.
From the people.
Yeah.
And it's been said that the first 5 months of every year that you work is 100% taxes. Now, I don't know if that number is summing up when you go to the gas station, you pay your gas tax, when you go to the store and you pay your local tax, and
Right.
you go to a hotel and you rent it. I don't know if it's adding all the taxes up that you spend in here, but the first 5 months of every year that you work is dedicated and devoted to tax dollars. And then the last 7 months is what you get to use for you. And so I really think the problem with the American economy and what would cause us to crumble and cripple is that we continue getting top heavy, and we have to be willing to make cuts. But the problem is, conservative or liberal, we don't want you to cut our issues. We don't want you to cut our section. And if you ran your local checkbook the way that government runs their checkbook, you'd be in trouble. A local school system has to spend all of their allotted dollars. And if they don't, at the end of the year, they lose those allotted dollars. And so if I was told spend it all or lose it, you know what I'm going to do?
Yeah.
I'm going to spend it.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt you're right about that the $18 trillion deficit or debt that we've incurred is not solely because of the people breaking into this country. Clearly not. But it's not helping.
No, and it's not adding. Like, the reality is every other American is paying taxes and assisting the system in that context, and they're not being taxed. But that's not just their fault. There's local businesses that are not paying taxes because they're employing people that aren't paying into the system. And the business isn't paying into the system because they're not recognizing the people that are illegal that are working for them. So it's a dual-sided sword here.
Well, about 50% of Americans pay federal income tax. So half of America doesn't pay federal income tax. That's tax-paying adults who work. So
Yeah.
the tax system is very, people always say the rich need to pay their fair share. They are doing that and more. I want to read a couple more sentences out of your thing on the Facebook. This is Ruben Reyes, who is a local minister out in the valley. We're talking about immigration. Legalize slavery right. By virtue of ignoring every facet of the legal issue, we have done several things. To ignore the issue is to acknowledge that we endorse slavery. These Hispanics are considered subhuman, undesirables. Actually, no different than how America treated slaves in the past. Who are you talking about? Who looks at Hispanics as subhuman and undesirable?
I don't know that it's necessarily Hispanics, but it is the illegal aliens. And so as a result, it typically goes to be the Hispanics. It doesn't matter what country, nationality they're from, they're illegal aliens. And so what happens is we look at these illegals and we go, oh, they just need to leave. We don't see them as people. And I'd think of that and I go, man, that's probably no different than we did 200 years ago when we looked at the slaves. We didn't see them as people. And if you have a group of society that's not viewed, that has standard human rights, like if you pass someone in the store and you just ignore them because they're illegals, then you have a group that you're looking beyond. And in America, if we have what we call a minimum wage, and there's another debate and discussion over the minimum wage issue, but if we have a minimum wage that we consider to be a minimal living wage, and there's people that are making less than that, then we have people that are coming in and working for less than, and they don't have human rights. Like one of the issues that you see in there is I talk about the sex trade industry. And
well, let's focus.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to stay with this, and we'll get into that. 569-1080. We're talking to Ruben Reyes. So I think to compare slavery, where we went into Africa, slave traders, and brought them here and chained them to poles and kept them, working without any freedom, to these Hispanics who their motives may have been right, but decided to break into this country ahead of everybody in line. That just seems like a pretty unfair comparison.
Seems like a good stretch, doesn't it? Okay, well, let's look at it like this. We have conditions that we want people to work under. We have basically, if you work in a factory, then there's certain things that factory has to do to make sure that that factory is safe, that you're getting basic natural needs met while you're working there. But when you pass by a Southern California field and there's people out there working, and you look at your temperature in the car and it's 108 degrees, and they're out there working in the field, and if they want relief, they go to these two poles in the ground with a tin roof over it that doesn't reflect or deter heat. Like, that's a less than desirable working situation. And no intelligent businessman or woman in this nation would be like, I'm going to sign up. That's what I want to do. I want to work at 110-degree weather in a field.
But to use the word slavery, these people are, do you think they want those jobs?
Absolutely.
So why are they slaves?
Well, I guess it's probably not much different than someone who may be working a minimum wage job that doesn't feel like they have the ability to get out of that rut. Like when you're in the middle,
that's just hopelessness. That's not slavery.
It is a hopelessness, yeah, because you don't feel like you can break free from it.
But you can.
Well, I think it's different. Like you and I, we get the opportunity to sit and consider these things, but there's a different level of humanity where when you don't have your needs get met, you start thinking about basic needs. You start thinking, I have to provide a roof over my head. I have to cover the meals for this next.
In this country, there's plenty of opportunity if you're willing to work hard. Yeah. And that's why people are coming here. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand the slavery reference.
Okay. Well, are there a lot of Americans that are competing for these jobs that the aliens are working?
To me, that's more of a socialist problem, Ruben. The fact that we will, there are people now, if like for me, if I were to go down to the disabilities office and say that I'm suffering severe mood swings, they'll start writing me a check for $800.
Mm-hmm.
Millions of Americans are on disability. 2/3 of them are because of mental disability now, because people understand the game. I can get a free cell phone. I can get rent. I can get food stamps. I can get disability payment. I don't really need to go to work. And if my choice of going out in the field making minimum wage, when I'll make just about the same, lying about being disabled, yeah, I'd probably take the disabled. And that's what millions of working able-bodied Americans are doing. But to me, that's a socialist problem.
Could be.
That's not, and you don't blame the immigrant for coming in and taking the job, because there are no jobs where they're from. The idea, and this is where I agree with you on the conservatives, to persecute someone who's living in a dirt floor with 2 young kids and literally no way to create wealth for himself,
mm-hmm.
for coming here and trying to make a better way for his family. That's just stupid. To persecute that person as some kind of despot or lawbreaker. But then it's also, I think, in the other extreme, to characterize that person as a slave, because they love that, going out into the field, picking the lettuce and having that actually something tangible that they've earned, that they don't have the opportunity to do back in their home. Fair?
Yeah.
Talking to Ruben Reyes, 569-1080. Fascinating discussion. 8:30 tonight. All right, here we go. 8:35, Dan Fagan show on a Tuesday morning, February 3rd, and number 569-1080, 569-1080. Speaking with Ruben Reyes, who's local minister out of the Valley, and talking on just about all kinds of stuff. You had said something that I struggle with, and I still don't know what I think about it, and I go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about critical thinking, and you say that we've lost the power we've lost critical thinking, and we've just kind of conservatives jump into their group and liberals jump into their group, and we don't really care what each other believes or try to understand it. We're just we gravitate to our position. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, that's absolutely a synopsis of what I was saying.
Now, my problem is, Ruben, and I'm just being honest here.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at the left and what they promote, and evaluate each one of their positions on an individual basis, and this is kind of what I do for a living. I literally formulate an opinion about positions.
Yeah.
And let me, before I get into that, I just want you to know right off the bat, I do not think, I have, this sounds shallow, but I have many friends who are left of center, and they're great people, and they mean well, and they absolutely, their heart's in the right place, and I don't look at them as bad people in the least.
Yeah.
But when I look at the left and what they believe, just literally down the line, I can't really find anything that the true leftist believes that I find any validity with. And I'm just being honest. I know that makes me king of closed-mindedness, because how could you say they're wrong about everything and I'm right about everything? I didn't say that. I guarantee you there are things I believe that aren't true. I guarantee I'm deceived on some things. I can't be the only person on the planet who everything he believes is true.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, when I honestly evaluate with humility the positions of the left, I honestly can't find one that I think.
I bet I could find one.
All right.
So when we're looking at these issues, the critical thinking is the topic that I've raised, and so here's a picture for you. Left we would typically say that they go towards socialism, and they may agree or disagree, but in the picture of it, it's generally leaning in that direction.
It's a centralization of power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I would disagree with this deal that everybody needs all of their needs provided for by the central government. Like, government isn't there responsible to take care of that. Like, I don't think that should happen. On a national level, it's so cost intensive because we're going to pay tons of executives in Washington the hundreds of thousands of dollars just to set up this new system, and it'll be top heavy again to get few dollars out to the people. It's backwards. But here's one for you. Like, I'm not socialist by any stretch of the imagination, but when I look at Denali Kid Care, do I think that that's a beneficial system for our local government? Well, yes, I do. I don't think that local children should be penalized because their families don't have finances.
Yeah.
And so is that a socialistic idea? Yes, it is.
Well, beneficial is a pretty loose word, because I've known of at least 3 different couples.
Okay.
Who had a baby.
Yeah.
They did not get married because had they gotten married, they would have priced out of Denali Kid Care.
Oh, wow.
And they're still not married.
Yeah.
And they still have kids.
Yeah.
So that's one downside of it. I think any time, and I agree with you, my goodness, a kid should never starve, obviously. Kids should never go hungry. But I think anytime you say to an individual, here's something free, you do not have to work for this, that changes that person's decision-making process and their valuation of money. I'm going to get free health care for my child. I don't have to buy health insurance. That's some extra money I can spend somewhere else. I'm going to get $800 a month in food stamps. Okay, I don't have to buy food. That's something else I can buy. Something. And really, and I've done stories, when you go into these households where the couple isn't married because their incomes would combine, and then that would hurt their eligibility, they're living pretty good.
Oh, yeah, and I've seen the numbers reports spread on it.
So the whole concept of doing for people what they could be doing for themselves, I think is a destructive concept. Now, the left would say, no, we need to give everybody anything they want. So I can't side with the left on that.
Yeah, and I agree.
No, but I don't think conservatives think a single child should ever go without a single meal.
Mhm.
I don't believe conservatives believe that at all.
Yeah.
But what the left says is, we're just going to throw money at the problem. We're going to give you as much money as you need, and we're just going to keep pumping money at you. We're going to take it from other people to do it, and we're going to keep growing the debt. I can't find that as a valid policy.
And that doesn't even work. Like back when we had the food stamps before it was the EBT cards, you would have people using that as a secondary currency to get their drugs and doing other things. And so it was broken even then. And now I've heard that people that have, some people, obviously not all, but some people that have drug issues have the EBT cards. Well, they'll hand their EBT card over to someone in exchange for their drugs.
But you say that the Now Kid Care Project is something you would side with, and I agree. I would side with it in the case of literally the parent or parents have no capability of working and are not able-bodied.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's. I would say that 90% of the Now Kid Care is given to the parents who could, if they truly wanted to, could work and pay their own way.
Well, potentially, but have you shopped for healthcare? Because when you shop for healthcare, that's a big cost to pay out of pocket, and not everybody can get a job that has free healthcare included with it.
Well, that's not true, because you go work at Fred Meyer's, 20 hours a week.
All right,
they'll give you healthcare for $250 a month. Go to go to Walmart, same. Target, same. Most of these companies will hire you part-time.
All right.
And most of the workers who work there do that solely for healthcare. Now, under Obamacare, healthcare is no longer an issue because everybody gets it free, which of course is going to totally bankrupt the country. But this government.org that they advertise every third commercial on TV or whatever it is, healthcare.whatever.gov, everybody gets free healthcare now, unless you make $75,000 a year,
or we get penalized for not having it.
Right, but my point is, so that's not really an issue anymore. So,
but like even with your illustration of Fred Meyer's, someone goes to Fred Meyer's, works 20 hours a week to get per se free healthcare that they can get for $250 a month.
Right.
Well, let's say they're making $10 an hour at Fred Meyer. I don't know what they make. Let's just say $10. They get taxed on those $10.
Oh, sure.
And so
they won't pay federal income tax.
They take home $150 a week out of 20 hours. That means 2 weeks out of the month is going for the medical.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's if they're working that on top of a regular 40-hour week job, just to make $300 a month and have free medical. And that's just not realistic.
But the alternative, well, it's realistic. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
But the alternative is have other people pay for your stuff. And you say, well, but I've got kids. Well, should you have not planned for your children? And should you have not said, okay, we're going to have a child. We need to make sure we have the right amount of income to be able to support that child.
Oh, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
But I don't think you do, because
I do totally.
Well, then why would we?
Because here's why. Should everybody be responsible for their own expenses? Absolutely.
But Denali Kid Care.
Are we gonna penalize the kids, the children that have parents that aren't responsible?
Yeah.
And when it comes to healthcare, I think that kids that don't have responsible parents still deserve to be taken care of, even if their parents weren't responsible.
Well, of course they do, and they always have been, and they always will be. No one has ever been denied health care in this country. Now, what Obamacare did is gave everybody health insurance. But if you're a child and you need health care, the doctor's not going to turn you away. The hospital's not going to turn you away.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a myth that the media told us, that there were kids being turned away for health care. It's just not true. We'll continue. Ruben Ray's interesting discussion. 8:44. Dan Fagan Show. 569-1080 is our number. Dan Fagan Show. We're talking to Ruben Reyes. It's a fascinating discussion about critical thinking, hearing the other side of the equation. And Ruben, my position to you is that I'm trying. I am. I swear to you, I am. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I think I am, but I've deceived myself. Maybe my heart has deceived myself on this. But I really am trying to think of a position that the left holds that I find valid. And I don't know how to employ humility any more than I am when I say, show me something.
Well, and
show me something the left holds that I can say, yes, that's a valid point.
All right. And so there's a handful of them. There's not a ton.
All right, give me one.
I mean, obviously there's not, and I still stand by the Denali Kid Care is probably one of the most solid.
And your point is that no kid should ever go hungry. But
I didn't say hungry. I'm talking about medical.
Or medical.
I mean, you can't prevent a kid from going hungry. Like you can give a parent an EBT card and they can sell it for drug money. You're not going to force food in that kid's stomach.
I'm not for. That's not a leftist position. The left doesn't say we should feed or give health care to hungry or to kids. That's a conservative and a left-wing position. But what the left says is that we should encourage people to depend on the government for their health care. Because literally that's all the left's doing. They're recruiting millions and millions of people saying, hey, guess what, man? Call this number, you get free health care. That is a very big distinction than what a conservative would say, which is, hey, if you got no other options, obviously we're going to make sure you get treated.
Yeah.
So I can't give that to the left because they're literally recruiting. And frankly, this is something I don't know for a fact. This is speculation because I can't look into the heart of another man. But frankly, I think that many on the left are recruiting dependents in such a fervent way for political gain because they know the more dependents, the more voters. Now,
Absolutely.
I can't prove that.
But
that makes sense.
There's a lot of different points that could lean in that direction, like even the illegal immigrant issue. If you have one party that's standing there saying, let's build a wall, let's send you out, and you have another party saying, we should legalize, we should allow them to be here, people are going to hear that and go, oh, you're for me. That's recruiting.
Sure.
Right?
And it'll pay off in the polls.
And conservatives would benefit from recognizing that that's recruiting because the reality is you go back to 1865 and it was a conservative issue that abolished slavery.
Yeah.
It was the Republican ticket that it was on that abolished slavery.
Right. But as far as, would you then call on the conservative movement to ignore the fact that we're 18 trillion in debt and a sinking ship because we have wide open borders and just for political gain, say, okay, we'll continue with wide open borders. We're now for illegal immigration.
I wouldn't call on them to do that. But I think even in that statement, it's kind of loaded. Like, I don't think that the illegal immigrant issue is the primary reason that we're sinking and we're 18 trillion in debt.
Have you been to Southern California lately? Seriously. I mean, that state is underwater.
And California is heavy on government being really fat.
Right. But that's because they've said that first of all, they ignore illegal immigrants. You do not get deported in California. The state does not recognize an illegal immigrant. You get all your benefits there. So the state is billions and billions in debt because they say if you break into this country and you come to California, not only will we not deport you, we won't even look into your immigration status, and you get everything free. It's the most generous welfare state of all the states in the country. And so it's a huge factor. It's a huge factor in California, the sinking of the economy there. But I'm still looking for one position that the left holds, and I can say, yes, that's right.
Well, Dan, and it may not even be that the left is right, but you don't have to agree with someone to hear them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to hear that.
So when you're examining the position of someone else and you're listening to understand where they're coming from and to still come and go, I understand, but I disagree with your conclusion.
Okay.
Like there's a difference to understand and disagree and to go, well, you're just stupid.
No, you're right. Name calling.
Does that make sense? I know.
No, I agree. I agree that, and I see where the left comes from. I know. I think I pretty much, because I've spent most of my career trying to understand the leftists.
Yeah.
And I do understand where they're coming from. I think, frankly, their main vantage point, I think what is at the very heart of the leftist is that they believe God messed up when he gave man free will.
Possibly.
Because everything they do is anti-freedom, except for the death of a child. Every single policy the left employs takes away your free will, with the exception if you want to end the life of your baby. They're all for that. And so it's just a common denominator through everything they believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess when I look at some of these issues, I see that there's two different socioeconomic levels within the nation. We have a class that has the opportunity to debate some of these issues, and we have a class that's going paycheck to paycheck. They feel like they're sinking. Like we have all these different businesses around, and I don't know if it's around the nation or just around Alaska, but come and cash your check early or pre-cash, and we'll give you money now. And that's a backwards ship. Like
So these classes, are you saying they're divided?
No. What
is it? To me, that's mostly decision making.
It may be, but it doesn't change that people are in two different sections. You have a
But
class.
how do you fix that?
Well, hang on. I'm trying to get to the thinking of it.
Okay.
So you have this, call it a middle class and an extreme lower class. And you have this middle class that has the opportunity to have discussions like we're having right now.
Right.
And then you have this extreme lower class that's just trying to pay their utility bill so it doesn't get shut off.
How do you fix
it? And hang on, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm trying to come at it from a different angle here. So if you have an extreme lower class that's like going, I have to keep my power on, I have to pay my rent, I got to put gas in my car so I can get to work, and they are struggling from dollar to dollar. And then you have 2008 happen, and you have a gentleman come up and he says, he writes a book called The Audacity of Hope.
Yeah.
And someone is sitting there and they're going, I don't care about abortion, I don't care about all these other issues that everybody else has.
Right.
But this man wrote a book called The Audacity of Hope. And you know what? I am struggling.
And you're talking about Obama. But how do you fix the problem?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I can tell you how I think the left says.
Yeah.
You got to take away people's freedom. You have to redistribute wealth. They're focused on equality. And that's what you're addressing, the inequality of mankind. There's only one way you fix inequality. Is you take away decision-making process, because decisions determine equality. Just what I do with my life, the freedoms I have, if I make good decisions, I will prosper. If I make bad decisions, I will not. So it is true that if I'm born into a poor family, I'm going to have to make more good decisions, and that will be at a disadvantage to someone who's born into a rich family.
Yeah.
But it's still my power.
Agreed.
I'm not a victim. But the left says you are a victim. There are two classes. You're stuck in those classes. I just don't agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
So I'm still looking for something that the left has.
All right. Another one that this one I get crucified on because most right-wing conservatives have hot topic issues, and this is one of them. And I get hammered on this one.
By the way, this is a fascinating discussion. I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, no problem. So this one is this, and you've stated that I'm a minister, and the issue of taking care of the earth. Like most conservatives, most Republicans will stand behind and say, you know what, we need to drill for oil, we need to do this, we need to, and we just go and we now the liberal would say we're raping the land, right, and the conservative would say we're utilizing our resources,
right.
But I look at it and I go, from a spiritual standpoint, I go, okay, as a believer, this earth is considered our inheritance.
Okay.
And if it's our inheritance, we should take care of it.
Okay.
Like we shouldn't trash it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so if we have the ability to fix our gas issue in the context of getting vehicles to run 100 miles a gallon.
Right.
And all of our politicians, liberal and conservative, go, well, we can't do that. We'd lose dollars. Well, stinking just charge more per gallon of gas. It doesn't matter. Fix the issues and protect our inheritance or save the earth. Right.
Well,
like,
I mean, those are all
myself in the target right now.
To say that I believe we should leave the earth as an inheritance and we should protect it, I couldn't agree more. But what has happened in reality is that the environment has improved radically in this country. You look at Los Angeles 10 years ago, you couldn't see across the street. Now it's like Wyoming.
Yeah.
And the cars are cleaner burning. We have made incredible strides. But what the left says is instead of worshiping the creator, let's worship the creation.
Yeah.
And they say you can't put a shovel in the ground. You can't mine any resources. It's no on everything, and that is an unreasonable position because
Agreed.
their God is the earth.
Yeah.
And so
Or self.
but I just can't. Again, there's no validity there. The reality, you got China where they don't care about the environment and everybody wears masks, but
Right.
that's not us. We're not. We can't be held accountable for that.
Mhm.
And so, I don't see the left's position on this with any validity. Never put a shovel in the ground is basically their
Yeah.
position.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe I've been put in the awkward position of trying to defend the left, which isn't the position that I normally want to be in. I'm like sitting here going, "You're asking me to defend the left, and that's not even where I sit."
Well, I'll tell you this. Like, I don't know how you feel about gay marriage, which I look. God loves gay people as much as He loves anybody. God does not hate gay people.
Agreed.
People who practice homosexuality are children of God. God loves them with all their heart. I don't judge them. I don't condemn them. I don't think I'm better than them. But there are a lot of people in the Christian world today who believe that God condones homosexual marriage because they see with their eyes and they see a couple of men or a couple of women who genuinely seem to be in love. And so, let's redefine the definition of marriage to fit their needs because that seems like the compassionate thing to do. And I just see this spirit of leftism beginning to kind of permeate the church, where people who are Christians are kind of hearing the surface thinking of leftism, which is every child should have health insurance, but it's much deeper than that. And it's beginning to infiltrate the church. Is that a fair position, or am I exaggerating?
No, I see where you're coming from. I think that people don't bring their morality to the table often enough. And I think families probably aren't taking the responsibility of raising and training their children. It's easier to allow them to be trained by government. It's easier to allow them to be trained by their televisions or by their YouTubes or by their peers. And when you have some people that sit under that liberal guise actively pushing towards a measure of discipling a child, you shouldn't be shocked when they grow up and they're like their master, the one who trained them.
Ruben, it has been an absolutely fascinating discussion. I really appreciate you coming in here and participating in it with me.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, thank you. Tomorrow we have Charlo Green, the gal who dropped the F-bomb on Channel 11 and walked out and head of the pot movement. She's going to be in studio with us tomorrow. Have a great Tuesday, folks. Dan Fagan Show.